Addiction to be telling Trump what to do. So as we see, this administration has been challenging the Constitution quite a bit since they got here. They said they was going to do that before they won the election. So they said what we said we was going to do when we got there, that's what we're getting ready to do. Now, this isn't the first time a president has tried our Constitution. It's happened before. I just don't think we've seen it as many times as we're seeing it now. Anyways, I say all that to say that, okay, we tested the Constitution a little bit. So my question for the evening is it just time for the Constitution to be amended, right? When the founders drafted the Constitution, you know that Thomas Jefferson, his suggestion was that the Constitution be amended every 19 to 20 years because he felt like the Constitution should be in alignment with the thought process was of the citizens that were to abide by the rules at that time. We haven't amended the Constitution since like the 90s. It's been a minute. Right? It's been a minute. And even when we did that, it took over 200 days to get that amended, right? But the question again is it time for the Constitution to be amended? And if so, how? With that being said, I am thinking of a number between 1 and 10. Dewan, you were first. What's the number?
7.
Okay. Inked, what's the number?
4.
The number was 10. Dewan, I'm going to let you start. I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock.
All right. So, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Go ahead and go.
Okay. Yeah, Thomas Jefferson, he was right for once when he talked about how it should be amended every 20 years because society changes, culture shifts every 20 to 25 years, you know? So you want to keep up with the times and the concerns of the times. And so I don't think that's a bad idea. But there are ways that it needs to be amended. Number one for me was, and it's been like this for a long time, it's been like the 13th Amendment, the prison labor situation, you know, when it comes to that. And the main reason why I go to that one is because for a lot of us American citizens, we lose jobs because the bigger issue than outsourcing is actually insourcing the prison, taking jobs that we could be having out here on the outside and putting them in prison. And I think it's a hustle, the way they force people into prison. You know, when you look at the Shelby Mustang and all the Shelby cars, they're in the Nevada State prison system. Levi, call centers are in prison. Here in California, firefighters, it used to be in the 90s and before that, you can get paid $80,000 a year to be a forest fighter. Now those jobs are for the most part gone because they give that to the people in the prisons. So I'm all about the American economy and the people of America that do things right, pay taxes, and make sure that we get our fair share. And I think that the 13th Amendment has been used to throw classes of black people and people and Americans in general in prison, and that's hurt the general worker that's out here on the streets doing jobs. And although I do not like Trump, did not vote for him, I think he's a thug. But I do like him talking about ending birthright citizenship. I think that's another, that's one of the few handful of things I agree with him on. And the primary reason is because of its abuse. And I got that ideal about 15 years ago. I was approached by one of the Armenian homies out here in LA. Now we cool with the family and everything. But they offered me like 80 grand to marry their cousin, you know, and for her citizenship thing. And that's one side of it. And on the other side, there was other friends that I knew in that circle that were basically just having babies and then going back to get the citizenship, and the family stays. And those same people, I still know them. And in the last 15, 20 years, the parents who did it still never went and got their paperwork things done. So I think that that's an abuse of the system. You said 1 second?
30 seconds. You get 20 minutes.
I think that people abuse that system, the birthright citizenship system. And I've seen it up close here in LA, all over the place. And me being someone my family's been here since 1640, I think that's not a good thing when people come here and just can have a baby and have the same rights that I had when I cannot go to your country and have the same thing. I believe reciprocity.
They said you, the comment section said you in here snitching and you being a hater. But aside from that, I just want to ask a few follow-ups. What in the 13th Amendment do you think should be changed? And then with regards to birthright citizenship, right, that would be under the 14th Amendment, if I'm not mistaken, under equal protection, right? So are you saying that the whole 14th Amendment needs to be changed and altered? Or are you saying the way that we interpret equal protection and due process needs to be changed and amended?
Yeah, and I think the way in the 14th Amendment, the way the birthright citizenship is interpreted needs to be amended. I think it needs to be more clear. I think that we just need to clarify, and whatever people come back, one generation, two generations, whatever. But I think that needs to be cleared up and not make it so easy for people to come here, have a baby, and then all of a sudden citizens, they go back and they're raised somewhere else, and then they come back here, and then it's, okay, yeah, now I got to compete with this person. No.
So if you had to, if they called you into the room and said, Dewan, how you think we should change the language in terms of birthright citizenship, what would be your suggestion? Like, what would you suggest just off the rip?
I would suggest off the rip that first all the people who were born under those conditions that are here now, let's make them citizens. They cool. You know, they it was done under the law, so it is. In the future, if you have a baby here, I think that they need to make sure that they specify that child is wherever you come from. If they have those type laws where they're citizens there, which most countries do, that they're still a citizen of that, and they have to go ahead and based on the record of the parents, have the parents apply, and then based on some kind of a determination process, decide who they let in and who they don't. But just for it to be a blanket statement and you're basing it off slavery, too many people come here to America and benefit off slavery just to crap on black people. And it's too open right now. Make it more linear, make it more straight, make it more codified.
All right, I appreciate that. I see the comments. It looked like some people agree with you on that. Yes, I agree. Please tap the screen. Let's run these likes up. Someone said, if born here, then who would these citizens of what countries? I think he kind of explained that. We'll get into that later. A lot of people seem to agree with you on that, Dewan. All right, Inks, 3 minutes on the clock. You ready, sis?
Yeah, well, look, I agree with him on that somewhat. Is the 3 minutes ready?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so we'll keep it super short and super sweet. I personally do not believe the Constitution in itself should be changed. The reason for that is the Constitution was put into place to protect us from the federal government. If you allow now the federal government to come in and start to make any type of changes, whether it be the language, whether it be to, what they feel is necessary in the time, it starts to get slippery. There would be no hard stop. Once we allow it once, they would do it over and over and over. The reason why, to protect us within the Constitution, 3 branches of government. That's why you have the courts. What do? They come in and they interpret it according to what is going on today. So based on how the Constitution is written, the court comes in and they say, hey, based on this is what's going on in today's time. This is how it's interpreted. So in the reality of it all, and in the big picture and in the grand schemes, what are we rewriting it for? What are we amending it for? The language is there. I do think that there are some loopholes. And just like he said now, even with the 14th Amendment and, being born here gives you outright citizenship. I think there are some loopholes that we do need to close up. But as far as the actual Constitution on its face, absolutely not. It is not. You don't have a constitutional right. The Constitution protects the rights that you have. And if you allow the government to amend that, they will infringe upon your rights. And I think a lot of people forget that. I think a lot of people don't understand that the Constitution is literally here to protect us from the federal government. That's exactly what it was designed for. That's why there's 3 branches of government, to keep everything separate, to make sure that we and ourselves have some protection and some voice within this federal government. And if you allow them to overreach, they will every single time. I believe we need less government, not more. So amending the Constitution is a bad idea. And I will leave it there.
Okay, I want to expand on that a little bit. Okay, so you said protect us. The Constitution was created to protect us from the federal government. And then you also said something about, based on how the Constitution is written, the courts are to interpret the laws. So I just want to be clear that the courts actually made a decision, the Supreme Court actually made a decision that is how they were going to use their power, right? And Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court said, no, this is what we're going to do. So it wasn't that the Constitution was written for them to do that, right? They didn't like the power that they had initially, and then they decided, no, this is how we're going to use our power. So I just want to do that. I want you to expand, though, on your idea of protect us from the federal government, right? Because if the founders made it an option for us to amend the Constitution, right? And I'm saying that one founder explicitly said the Constitution should be changed every 19 to 20 years. And his thought process was that if you don't do that, then you're not giving the people the freedom that we wanted in the first place, right? What you are doing is you are controlling people in a way they don't want to be controlled. That's not the language he used. I'm just breaking it down in more clear language. So I want you to expand on that idea for me real quick and help me understand.
Okay, so because the Constitution doesn't actually give you rights, it doesn't give you your rights. You have rights. It just protects those rights.
What does that mean? What do you mean?
Okay, we'll just use something simple as your freedom of speech. It doesn't give you the right to that freedom. It protects the government from infringing on that right.
Okay.
So when you start to, every 10, we'll say every 20 years, what are we changing? What are we adding? Yes, like the world looks different, but it stays the same, if that makes sense. Yeah, it looks different because maybe the issue is different. But then what happens is it starts to impede on feelings. Mm-hmm. So then people want you to change it based on how they feel. Mm-hmm. You already have the right is there. It's just that people like to see it in writing. And that is where we're at today, is that people feel like, well, there's things that are missing and there's things that are not written. No, you already have it. It's there. It's just that this keeps the government from infringing on that very right. And so for me, it's just a slippery slope because there's no stop. So if I allow you to say, if I say, what religion is a good one, right? Or if I say, I think if you have short hair, you shouldn't be this. And then I allow people to say, well, everybody with short hair, should be on this side of the road and everybody with long hair should be on this side of the road. It becomes a slippery slope. You already have the right to have long hair or short hair or no hair. What do we need it written down for? It's there. So I just think if you use the Constitution for what it is, what are we changing? What is there to modify? What do we need to do differently?
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna let you respond, Dewan, in a second. No, I'm gonna let you respond now, and then we'll build on that. You ready?
Yeah, I was gonna say. And I get that. That makes sense. That makes sense. And I just want to offer a different point of view. When you look at the civil rights legislation, both in the 1860s and the 1960s, that was adding amendments onto the Constitution to consider these groups of people that you hadn't considered before. And so the 1868 civil rights legislation, the 1963, 1968. So you have to now, we purposely ignored these people. So now we have to include them in because of us purposely leaving them out to begin with. And so in those ways, that's where you want to make amendments. And from there, you want to have correction to those amendments. What we now realized is since the civil rights legislation happened, Black people still don't. There's written law, then there's implied law. And we tend to still be governed by implied law, not written law. And we find that corporations actually benefit from civil rights more than actual humans do, as far as protecting their rights to do a lot of the things that they do to us. And we see that now that these civil rights legislation has been around for a long time, Title VII and these different amendments that corporations use for their benefits against Americans. So now would be time to amend if there was another thing that I could even add to the first part would be to amend that these rights are to protect human beings. And that whole corporate personhood thing that they ruled that corporations benefit from. So we're seeing that something that was meant for humans is actually working for the people that keep us humans in check, and that's these corporations. So, that's why, I'm for amending the Constitution, because it's like, one, you do have a great doctrine, whatever, depending on which way you look at it, great. Exactly. But you also got to see how it's being used and how we need to change how it's being used since its inception.
All right. You ready, Inked?
Yeah, sure. I'm not quite sure where you're going with that. I understand it, but we have human rights. And a corporation can't infringe on that, not even legally. And if they do,
Human rights is corporations protect themselves from being sued because corporations because they use our civil rights legislation that's meant for us, and they're saying corporations can be treated as humans, and so that protects them. I don't have myself written down right now, but that protects
to a certain extent, it protects them to a certain extent. You are still governed legally to what a corporation can and cannot do. That's right down to how much they pay you. So I hear what you're saying. But
not to cut you off, Ink, sorry. So Dewan, a corporation is a private entity, right? When we're talking about the Constitution specifically, you have to have a government actor. Right now, there are some laws that corporations and private entities have to abide by, but to be protected by the Constitution in general, or not even protected, it is protecting you from being violated by a government actor.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So I hear everything that you're saying, but the Constitution, when it was amended, it needed to be amended. At this stage in the game, if you could tell me something literally that at this point needs to be amended that you don't have, is not your right, then we could have a different conversation. But at this stage in the game, there's nothing we, not even us nicely beautiful melanated people, we're doing it. We're sitting here on a live, on our cell phones. We're educated, we're successful. We own things, we do things. So at this stage in the game, we are thriving. So what are we amending? What right don't you have that you now needed to be appointed in the Constitution?
It's not about what right that I don't have. It's about the fact that the corporation has the right to hide behind corporate personhood when we need to sue them for something that they did wrong, and they can't be sued because they're standing behind constitutional corporate personhood. Such as when we're talking about, it's a lot of different examples. Hell, we can talk about what happened with the jab. And when you look at these corporations not been when they're pushing that jab out, and they were saying that they cannot be sued for whatever may happen in the future, when they were putting those laws in back in 2020, those are behind corporate personhood laws that will. And I forgot the exact name.
No, they weren't laws. No,
but it happened in 1977 under the Carter administration.
Hold on, they weren't when the jab happened. They weren't laws. As a private company. I'm talking about
our ability to sue them.
For what?
Our ability to sue them. Like we can't legally sue them right now.
Sue them for what?
For if someone came out and it was determined medically that the jab led to other issues and people are having that, not me personally, but there are people out there all across that are having issues from that jab. They cannot now go and sue because corporations are protected by corporate personhood.
Because it's not the corporation that made it. So you have the choice.
It's the Constitution that made it that way.
No.
We can't get damages.
No, the corporation.
1977, Jimmy Carter, go look it up.
Okay, hold on. The corporation. Okay, the corporation did not make the jab. That's why you cannot sue them. And a job can require whatever they want for you to be employed. So what are you suing them for? I can't hear you. You're muted.
I muted you. Sorry. I muted you.
Oh, sorry.
No, Dewan, I muted you. Unmute yourself.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Y'all was talking over each other.
It's about if someone took a jab and they wake up the next morning and they're going, yeah. They go to a doctor and the doctor concludes that jab is the reason why they're now going, yeah. They can't go and sue for damages. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so you're talking about the person who made the jab, but no, I'm saying you're not talking about suing your job. You're talking about suing the person that made the jab.
Suing the people who made the medicine.
Got it. Okay, now I got it. Okay, sorry, I misunderstood you.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they did protect them from that. Now, I was confused. I thought you meant sue your company.
Yeah.
Okay,
I got you.
Okay, sorry about that. Go ahead. I
I
was just trying to have a better understanding. Yeah. So, but I did want to make a point because I did want to go back to him talking about amending the 14th Amendment, the prison, like labor,
That's fair too.
Sorry, yeah. So I wanted to go back to that because you made a good, you were making somewhat of a good point. You were kind of moving down the road of that point. But the reality is you're
Multiple.
paying your back to society, right? So you do a bad crime, you have to pay it back to society. So my biggest problem with that is that if people do some pretty heinous crimes, I mean, some pretty heinous things, if we make it easy, we're just like, oh, we're going to treat you like a human when they didn't give grace to someone else, that for me is a problem. I want prison to be awful because I would like for you not to go back. But if you should make it there because you committed a heinous crime, I don't feel bad. Now, I understand there's some innocent people. I understand not everybody, commits these crimes. And I recognize that the system is not perfect. But once you start to say they are owed something, everyone is owed it. So it won't matter if you took a steak. Because, remember in California, 3 strikes, you're out. I mean, there were some people who got some lame life sentences because they were like stealing food, and it was their 3rd strike and they were out of here. I think that's extreme. But if you committed a heinous crime, guess what? You get what you get. And I don't agree with that in its entirety.
Can I clarify that?
Ask the question real quick and then, or go ahead, Dewan, go ahead.
And I want to clarify that because I don't know if you're listening to what I was saying.
Yeah.
I wasn't saying anything about the prisoner. I believe the prisoner should pay. My issues with free citizens. If I wanted to go apply right now to become a firefighter for the National Forest Registry, I cannot get that job that used to pay $80,000 a year. Why? Because California said, you know what? We're not going to hire citizens for these jobs. We're going to pay you 75 cents an hour to do it in prison. Shelby, every time you see a Shelby upgrade on a Mustang, Shelby Mustang, those strong engines, instead of an honest American being able to work at the Shelby factory in Nevada, the factory job doesn't exist. So Shelby can make that engine component in the prison and make 10 times the profit. This helps corporations. I believe in everybody. If you commit the crime, do the time, and there should be jobs available for you in prison to do if that's what needs to be done. But corporations should not be allowed to shut down factories for free American citizens that do things right and give those jobs to somebody who's been locked up. No, why? No, pay what you weigh. Why should I lose an $80,000 a year job so somebody who has all the money in the world can pay 75 cents an hour for the same thing? That's what I'm talking about.
So the aspect of the 13th Amendment that you want to see change is the slavery aspect and not allowing incarcerated individuals to work these jobs that could be public service jobs in a sense. So like the fires that we just had in LA, right? Where we maxed out on our firefighters essentially, right? But we also there's a program in the county jails, the fire program, where inmates get to train as firefighters. And then if something serious, event like we just had not too long ago happens, they go out and they help and fight the fire. So are you saying that they should not have those opportunities or what's the argument?
What I'm saying is all this stuff got shifted in the 80s and the 90s. Mm-hmm. Back in the 80s, if we had a forest fire, you had just as many people out there fighting fires, but they got paid a living wage salary, which the state can afford to pay. The state, so it can be cheap, said, let's cut these jobs and let's give them to people in prison so we don't have to pay as much money. Corporations can say, I could open up a factory and make these pair of jeans, but I don't want to pay people minimum wage and give them benefits and give them rights. So we're going to cut this factory and we're going to contract with that prison. That's about corporate welfare. Corporations being able to make 10 times the profit while American citizens suffer. If you want to stop crime, get jobs. You stop crime with jobs. But if you're cutting the jobs on the streets and putting those jobs in prison, you're creating a funnel for people to go to prison.
I don't agree with that.
They hustle us with that.
I don't agree with that completely. The idea is to give them a trade.
Yeah, they got plenty trades. Go and crochet.
Okay, so the idea is it's like a part of the rehab system, right? So while you're in prison, they rehab you, they give you a trade, you learn to be a fireman, you learn to be a mechanic, whatever that is. The situation is this: there's a huge tax write-off for that. Like a huge tax write-off. Now, I do understand not everybody, there are jobs that are being taken away, but I don't think jobs are being taken away at the level in which you say. I think that like these big fires that happen in California, you need all the help that you can get. You need to be able to bring everybody in. So when you have people who are trained and say, hey, let's go fight this fire, they go fight this fire. And that's their way of giving back and paying back their debt to society. I mean, it is what it is. And I always think it's interesting that we feel like a corporation owes us anything. I always think I think that's an interesting thing when people come back and say, hey, you own a business and you don't have the right to save money and you don't have the right to do this. You owe this job to somebody else. No, I think anybody who owns a business understands that the process of owning a business is profit. So if the government comes in and says, hey, we'll give you a huge tax break if you build your Shelby engines inside of this prison and train these prisoners on how to work on cars, we'll give you a tax break. Oh, why wouldn't you do it? So I don't know why we think corporate America owes us anything, and I surely don't understand why we think corporate America gives a damn. And that's the reality.
Who said corporate America owns us? I don't owe us. I never said that.
No, but you're upset that they're giving the jobs to the people in the prison, and you feel like you should have that job. Why do you feel like you're entitled to the job and not the guy in prison?
I don't feel entitled. I feel that they're Americans who paid for trade school, who graduated high school, who have those skills for those jobs, and they should get those jobs over people over somebody who killed somebody.
Okay, I'll agree with that, but that not everybody in prison has taken life.
For these particular jobs, when it comes to prison, like there are qualifications, right? So if you're 9 times out of 10, if you're in there for unaliving somebody, that's the language.
You're not going out to fight the fire.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So there are certain it's short timers, right? So you'll see people more like domestic violence, or maybe you have like a minor, theft or something like that.
That honestly, it depends on the job and with the way it was. And that literally does depend on the job. And I do believe that there was once a time that there was more of a balance when prisoners were using their skilled labor to make office furniture for government offices. When they were the ones making government cars, things that work for the government, because the government needs a lot of stuff. If the government needs to do this, have that prisoner do it. If license plates need to be stamped for the DMV, have that prisoner do it. But don't shut down a factory in Ohio that employed 2,000 people so a prisoner could do it. Because why? There's a one-to-one connection between opportunity and prison. When people have jobs, they don't go to jail. You take away the jobs, people go to jail. That's a one-to-one connection.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ink.
No, he's reaching. He got his arm stretched out and he's reaching, because the reality is this: there's not
reaching for what?
Okay, the reality is, if you get a trade, people are getting jobs. Okay, it's not like every job is within the prison system. But what's our biggest complaint about the prison system is people go in and they don't come out better, and then they reoffend and then they go back. Yeah. So I'm all about, if you are a low offender, you know what I'm saying? And you are not some extreme psycho, you deserve to be reformed and get a trade just like the next person. So I hear you, but I have never personally, and I will look into this, heard of an entire factory being shut down to be moved into a prison system.
Thousands. So, well, we have that now, but they still go back to jail. We got people that they got the jobs now, and they going right back. So it isn't working.
I think it's a rehabilitation issue, right? But it's not really a constitution issue. Also, just real quick, I know I see in the chat people are asking if I'm going to let people up. Yeah, give me about 2 to 3 more minutes. I'm going to start letting guests up to join the conversation. So please send me a request. I just take them as I see them. So send me a request. I'm not coming to look for you. You got to come ask me. As I see the request, I will add you up on the stage if you want to join the conversation. But I want to go back. Inked, I know you mentioned earlier, like there's no need for us to amend the Constitution. Like we're perfect where we are right now, and the Constitution was written to protect us. But I want to address like the fact that we didn't start off with the Constitution, right? I think we started off with like the Declaration of Independence, and it went to like Confederate Articles of Confederation or something like that, and then we started amending the Constitution to fit.
Yeah,
the
we
time.
created it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to. So if the idea of the founders was to change the Constitution, right? Let's even say from here, right? Like we're talking about how Trump is saying, or Trump's team is saying, you know what, we got our man, we want to see him for a third term, right? This is who we like. Maybe we're not in a space right now, right? And this was amended. The 22nd Amendment was happened in the 50s, right?
Yes,
Because
I believe so.
Right, because FDR had like 4 terms, and it was like, okay, enough is enough. So I guess my question is like, are we at a space and time now where like people feel like, you know what, the 2 terms are not enough. We're not getting enough done in the 2 terms. Maybe we should make a change on that.
Okay, so I'll say this. We know the process of amending anything, right? So if the people in the states and the Congress come together and say, yes, we feel like this is something that should be amended, then let's start that process, right? Unfortunately, if I'm going to be honest, I don't think it should be amended because 2 terms is too long at some points, right? Sometimes letting people be there for 8 years is too long. And that's the real reality. They're old. I would rather them cap the age than, to say, hey, you can keep going because we're not going to make this completely political. But I feel like it's long.
Political debate show. We are going to make it political.
I feel like, okay, then, Joe Biden shouldn't have came back. Like he needed to go. That was just the real reality. And so I do feel like there are maybe some things that, yes, we can address it, but it has to be the process. I just don't want people being able to say, oh, we should amend my feelings, because that's where we're at today. There's a lot of feelings and people feeling like they don't have something and people feeling like it needs to look different. But the reality is you have it.
Give us
you
an
just
example.
Need to exercise it. We are free. We are humans. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we are free to live our life. The real reality. But some people feel like they need something in writing that says, I was reading that people want to, amend it for like, there's no real writing for gender. You don't need it. You have human rights. You don't need something that says as this gender that, as a male or female, you don't need it. You have human rights. So I think that's where the line starts to get blurry, because if not, we would literally have a bunch of captions of time. And it's not easy to overturn. Does that make sense? So if you implement something, it's not like you can just pull it back and say, oh, you know what? We changed our mind. This doesn't fit the time anymore. It doesn't fit the time. That's not how this works. So right now you're hearing more of this constitutional crisis when the reality is you don't have any constitutional rights because the Constitution doesn't give you rights. So for me personally, and I just speak for myself, I don't think it's necessary unless it's necessary. So like you spoke about Trump and the running again, if somebody feels it's necessary, it's not going to happen, right? You're not going to get the states and everybody to conform. But hey, go through the process. I just don't want somebody saying, because I believe one way, it should be changed. And I just want the federal, I'm a firm believer the federal government needs to be as removed as possible. The least amount of they're in our business, the better.
Okay, you guys, send me a request if you guys want to join in this conversation. I guess another question I have for both of you, right, is like, if we're talking about, for going back to President Trump right now, right, and them saying that they want him to run a 3rd term, and the Constitution explicitly says, right, what Congress's job is, what the legislative job is, what the executive job is and their responsibility, and the judicial branch's job and their responsibility. But we see this being tested and tried, right? Because there are enumerated powers, which are powers that are explicitly written in the Constitution, right? And then there are like perceived powers, right? Or interpreted, however the court interpreted those powers to mean. That's how we read it. And now we're seeing, again, Trump is pushing the boundaries on this by deporting people, right? Using the Aliens Enemies Act, for example, where the act clearly says there has to be a declaration of war. Well, only Congress can declare war, right? Congress has not declared war with Venezuela. However, Trump is saying, I have it is under my executive power to be able to enforce this in this way. And then when it went to court, right? What is the court's job? The court's job is to interpret the laws and say whether or not we are in compliance with how this particular law was written. However, you have people like Stephen Miller who are saying, no, you don't have jurisdiction to do that. Now you're impeding on the president's power. So perhaps do we need to rewrite our constitution, or what do we need to do something to make it more clear what each branch's job is?
That I would probably say yes, that part of it needs to be clarified. But I don't think that is necessarily a rewrite, if that makes sense. I do believe that if you're going to do it, it just needs to be done and handled correctly. But I don't think that that's a need of a rewrite. That's just me, though.
Fair enough. All right, we got Liv to be great up here. Liv, go ahead, 2 minutes.
Cool. I'm just gonna get a couple elephants out the room real quick. One, making indigenous people immigrants on indigenous land is just weird. Don't see the justification for that at all. Point number 2, capitalism sucks. About poverty, absolutely it sucks. Point number 3, it's weird watching black people on this app advocate for slavery. The 13th Amendment still upholds slavery. To be descendants of African slaves and to argue for slavery is a really weird position to take. Last point, the Constitution has been outlined to not see black people as human. We know this because of Federalist Papers 54, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3 of the Constitution. We can look at the impact of the 13th Amendment, the necessity for the 14th and 15th Amendment. We can look at how after the 14th Amendment was passed in 1868, that there was segregation. The founding fathers themselves knew that the Constitution should be ratified every 2 decades. Our society today is not the same society of 1787. We as black people would not be on this app doing what we're doing on TikTok if the times were the same. I'm gonna let my plane there because this was just really weird to watch. Why shouldn't we amend the Constitution, abolish the entire thing, and rewrite it for the benefit of our society today?
Ooh, that's deep. Who want to respond to that first?
He makes a good point. You know, we live in, as far as making things current, because look, we live in post-Patriot Act society. The Patriot Act gave president and the rights that, and a lot of people that say the Constitution believe the president should never have. So the presidents since post-Patriot Act, they've been running wild. And so to go to this point as far as having a rewrite of what the Constitution is today, we live in a completely different world, you know, that things do need to be codified because, again, if we're going to talk about updates, you know, the Constitution once supported Dred Scott. Well, they still kind of do, but they created some amendments to at least act as if they codified it. But we understand that, you know, these things have to be said explicitly if you want to help people out. And if you don't say it explicitly, then generally, when it falls in the cracks, it's going to work for the few wealthy elite, and us black folks going to fall on the bottom of it. So I'm all for, you know, like what he said, making it more amendment, because we cannot ignore that elephant in the room and the fact that the Constitution we're the only people specifically mentioned in it, you know, when it comes to not getting rights.
So are we
that's why they
saying
amended
we need
it.
more laws to be codified as opposed to amending the Constitution then? Are we saying that the legislative branch needs to make more laws or needs to be more explicit in their lawmaking?
I'm saying it has to be amended in the Constitution, because if we just take the Patriot Act alone and the powers that it gave the president the power to declare war, because when you look at the last couple wars we've been in since the Patriot Act, the Congress didn't approve it. So that Patriot Act gave the president powers that the Constitution never imagined in 1776. So some of that stuff does need to be amended and codified and made very clear what powers the president has, because since the Patriot Act, the laws are very convoluted and unclear. And Trump has been riding on that line. Well, Obama too.
Go ahead, Ink.
I'm not getting down with Liv and his emotionalism. I'm just not. I don't advocate for slavery. You know, like he just came up here to say he knows. He knows.
I love you too, Ink. Also,
I am not doing this with, like, I'm not even kidding you. He comes up here, and this is what he does every time. The emotionalism is wild.
Well,
it is wild.
Listen. We may disagree, Ink. All I'm saying is this. If I tell you that I'm going to abolish driving my car, that under no circumstances will I drive this car ever, except on Sundays to go to the grocery store, do I still drive that car?
Liv.
Okay, the answer
is not even the same.
Okay, but what I'm saying is,
no, you're not saying anything.
Yes, I still drive the car. So when the United States government, when the United States government in the 13th Amendment abolishes slavery except in the commission of a crime, and then we can look at the disproportionate outcomes and the impact of laws, policies, and procedures that codified segregation, the disenfranchisement of black people, mass incarceration. We watched the sitting U.S. president dump over 500,000 metric tons of booger sugar in black and brown communities, and black and brown people were the ones that were criminalized, right? When we know that this document exists, when we know that the 13th Amendment still upholds chattel slavery in this country,
no,
because there are still prisoners in Angola that pick cotton, right?
What is that got to do with us?
What I'm pointing out is that it's weird to watch the descendants of enslaved Africans have an argument to uphold and maintain slavery.
Wait. What did you just say? Did you just say descendants of what?
Descendants of enslaved Africans.
That's not me, but okay.
Sure. 85% of the 48.4 million black Americans in this country are descendants of African slaves.
You are right.
Yes? Cool. So if that is the case, the vast majority of a demographic in America, right, are affected by the 13th Amendment.
Okay. And in 2025? In 2025?
Yes. Yes, we see the numbers. We see the numbers. Like the idea, and we see the justification behind the numbers. People say terms like black on black crime doesn't exist based on proximity and poverty.
We're educated, Liv. We're educated. We're free.
Listen, we can say that, but it still doesn't. No, we're not saying it.
We are. That's a fact.
Listen. Jeremiah Henderson was the first black millionaire in 1850. Would you say in 1850 that black people were not oppressed?
It's 2025.
Okay. Michael Jordan is arguably one of the greatest basketball players in U.S. history. Also, one of the wealthiest African Americans, one of the wealthiest black Americans in this country. While he was winning 6 championship rings, Ronald Reagan and Republicans were dumping metric tons of booger sugar in black and brown communities, enforcing laws, and being lobbied by private prisons to over-police black and brown communities, leading to mass incarceration while simultaneously underfunding schools, creating a school-to-prison pipeline. So
what does that have to do with Jordan?
In the 90s, in our era, in the 80s that we were born, and in the 90s, the crack epidemic was waged on black Americans by the United States government. Okay. So we can't sit here and say that, we live in a post-racialized society when we can see the disproportionate outcomes of the criminal justice system. And that doesn't include education, housing, the labor market. In every form and fashion, we see disparity between black people and white people.
Okay, you say a whole lot. Okay.
Go ahead, respond. Just respond the best way you can, Ink.
No, he says a whole lot, but it's always the same thing, right? Liv says the same thing over and over and over. The reality is this. We are free, Liv. Just like you and I are sitting here right now having this conversation, we're having it on these very expensive phones, okay? On all the things that we pay for because we can. The choice is always going to be ours. So when you speak in today's time, I'm sorry, but the world is at our fingertips. And more of us are seeing that, and more of us are grabbing onto it, and more of us are excelling and saying, hey, I want more with my life, and I'm going to have more with my life. I don't understand why you make a reference to, the stuff being dropped into communities and Michael Jordan. I don't even understand where the correlation comes together. It's apparent because he made a whole lot of money and still makes money, and everybody's still walking around with their shoes. So what are we really talking about?
What we're talking about.
The limit is ours. The limit is ours. So if somebody drops drugs into your community, we love the TikTok shot. If they drop that stuff into your community, don't do it. When do we take accountability? When do we accept responsibility that there's different choices that can be made to better your life?
I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
Go ahead.
Okay, listen, here's the problem, right? Is that the society was made for white people, okay? That at some point, if we're going to talk about accountability, there have been 46 out of 47 presidents that have been white. There are 108 out of 116 Supreme Court justices that have been white. We look at our legislative branch over 250 years, and over 90% of them have been white. When is white America going to take accountability? When are we going to stop asking black people to take accountability for the problems of this country when we've never been in positions of power to create the problems that we see? The Republican Party is responsible for the vast majority of this nation's debt. When is America going to take that accountability? Stop talking to black people about taking accountability for atrocities that we never asked for. We didn't ask to be into this country. We didn't ask for chattel slavery. We didn't ask for segregation. We didn't ask for mass incarceration at all. When is white America going to take accountability for the atrocities that they've done to marginalized groups in this country?
Can I draw a line real fast on that? The draw a line, okay, is documented recordings of, people like Kissinger and Nixon, Goldwater talking about how when they created the war on drugs, that was actually the war on hippies and black people. So this country declared war on its own citizens. That's number one. Another fact is 16% of the population is going to do drugs no matter what race you are. People get on drugs. That's just what it is. You have a country that criminalized when black people did drugs and it gave them a felony. And when versus with other groups, we either get a misdemeanor or not get charged at all. Why does this all draw and connect? Because once you get a felony, 13th Amendment. Now once you get that felony, you now are your constitutional rights are for the most part stripped away. You're under the 13th Amendment, and now they can send you back. You're right back into slavery because of the 13th Amendment, because you got a felony. And yes, people should do better. People shouldn't get on jobs where we don't live in a world of should. We live in a world of reality. And across races, 16.5% of the population will get on drugs, white, Asian, Latino, whatever. And it's just that the black people are the ones who are criminalized for it. And when they get that criminalization, they're now victims of the 13th Amendment. That's how that happens. It's like, okay, you set up something. Now my rights are gone because my cousin over there had a problem and got on some drugs. Now they no longer have rights. That's something that we gotta address that.
Tribe of Shabazz, 2 minutes. Hello?
Do they know they're here?
Going once. Going twice. All right, bye. Ink, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, listen. I don't understand how we want to blame the white man when many of us get out of these crazy circumstances. I just don't understand. At some point, you have to say, my life, I'm in control, and I'm going to go down this path. You just have to make good decisions. It's not difficult. And the reality is it's all in a situation, right? You can put any race of person and anything, you could drop them into the same scenario. Some will come out one way, some will come out another. You have people who were raised with both their parents. One sibling is good, the other sibling is not. So
I just want to stop you right there real quick, because I think that's the point that they were trying to make, right? Or this is what I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong. For example, right? So you have two people. You have a 15-year-old black boy, a 15-year-old white boy, right? Let's just say, right? Both of them are doing meth, right? Both of them are convicted of selling meth, right? And the 15-year-old black boy gets tried as an adult because you're in court, right? Prosecutor's white, judge is white, right? You're in court, 15-year-old black boy gets charged as an adult. 15-year-old white boy gets treated as a child, right? So again, all white courtroom, judge is white, prosecutor is white. So I think like that's what it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong. That's sort of the connection they're making when it comes to that, is like, it's not, although we are free, theoretically, are we really free when it comes to how the system was created, established, and who it's run by?
Okay, so I will say this. A lot of that is classism, and a lot of that comes down to money. Private versus public. If you have a private attorney, it looks very different than when you have a prosecutor.
As a lawyer, I disagree, but go ahead.
Okay.
Highly disagree. I've seen plenty of cases, but go ahead.
I've seen some too that are not quite the same. And I will say that it doesn't always come across that way, but I do know, and like I told you earlier, the system it's far from perfect. But the reality is, when you can pay for your attorney, it looks very different than when you can't. And I do believe that in certain situations and in certain circumstances, we're going to see some play in the field. But that still does not change the reality of, we need to make better choices, we ourselves, and we need to go down a path. It just doesn't change that. And I can't blame the next person for any bad decisions that I've made. I cannot. It doesn't matter what's put in front of me. I still have the right, and I still make good decisions. And so I do believe that ultimately, when it's all said and done, we have to stop looking for an escape. We have to stop looking for an escape, and we have to start accepting some accountability for how we live our life.
The way I see that, that's emotionalism, because you're saying what people should do, and that's not reality. The reality is,
what is
100 people.
We have to watch our language when I think I messed up. So I apologize for that, because I used an actual word instead of like.
Okay.
Yeah, so I apologize for that.
Yeah, I was saying, that's emotionalism. If you have 100 people, there are going to be 100 different decisions made. But if you have this race of people, regardless of economic status, they're going to get felonies. And if you have more than likely, they're going to get felonies versus the other race. And once they get a felony, we're right back at the 13th Amendment. And you losing your constitutional rights because a judge decided, even though you're black and you have rights and you're American citizens and you have money, you went ahead and you broke this law, so we're going to charge you with a felony. That white kid broke the same law, we're going to give him a misdemeanor, or we might just throw it out. The fact of the matter is, this happens every day, and to not acknowledge that fact is pure emotionalism. We're in what should happen versus what is happening. I live in the world that does happen. I live in the world where we have to say, okay, these things are happening, and they're happening at a disproportionate way towards these people that are black. Now, let's do something legally so that we can give a tangible solution to this real life problem that, yes, people should. But the fact is that out of 100 people, there are going to be 100 different decisions. And if there's 100 people that are out there, 16 of them are going to get on drugs, but the black ones are going to get felonies and the rest of them aren't. That's just what it is.
Can I respond?
You got 1 minute, Liv. Go ahead.
Cool.
And then close out for me.
Yeah, I got you. Being black isn't a bad decision. Being black in a white supremacist society is not a bad decision. When we look at the conversation around capitalism, around money, and who has money and who does not have money, segregation would deprive black people of wealth. Chattel slavery would deprive black people of wealth, while at the same time, white America had economic opportunities. You had the Homestead Act. You had the New Deal. During times of segregation, the GI Bill, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. They even co-opted food stamps from the Panthers, right? Given every economic opportunity to move themselves up. One of the most golden eras for this country was post-World War II, right? In the 1950s, it was an economic golden era, right?
20 seconds.
All of these things gave them opportunities for wealth and deprived black people of opportunities for wealth. The first capital sold in this country was black people, right? And so being black is not the crime. White supremacy is in fact the crime. And we need to address that in our Constitution. Lastly, this is Live to Be Great. Y'all can follow me on YouTube at The Laugh Cookout. AB, I appreciate you for having me up. As always, it's been a pleasure. Ink, Sugar Grits, I get it. Love you too.
No, salt and butter.
You gotta have a good night.
You too. I actually love sugar grits. But anyways. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
with you on that.
only salt and butter. That's it. What are we doing?
All right. Dewan, since you started, I'm going to let Inked close out for me. So, Dewan, go ahead 1 minute and then shout yourself out for me.
Yeah, I have to say, we got to understand that nothing's perfect. No document is perfect, and things need to be updated. My company, I'm updating the bylaws of my corporation in this process now, because things have changed. Sometimes you have to update your statement of information in your LLC because things change. And so if it's like that, it happens like that in this country too. The internet didn't exist when that document was written. The internet was barely a thing when the last time the Constitution was amended. So there are a lot of new things, a lot of new developments. We have innovation. We have new people here. We have new themes, new things. And all of this new stuff needs to be considered, especially in the post 9/11, post Patriot Act world, where a lot of things have become muddy because of that Patriot Act and things and subsequent moves since then. So we have to acknowledge that and live with the country that we're in right now. And then in 20 years, it's going to be time to talk about it again, 20, 30 years, because that's what it is. Find me everywhere. I'm very rarely here on TikTok. I'm mostly on YouTube at Dewan B. If you take the one off and just put Dewan B everywhere, DewanB.com, Dewan B on Twitter, Dewan B on Instagram, and Dewan B on YouTube. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dewan. Inked 1 minute.
Here's my 1 minute. I don't even need it. Check it out. Listen. Change is already come and change has already happened, and you don't need it in writing. Okay? That is the real reality. The Constitution gave us a guideline, and now we're going to move forward. I don't know what emotionalism I had, but hey, it is what it is. I'm not here to judge anybody's take on it. I do think as a people, though, an American people, we need to just accept that our rights are given. We have them now. And now let's just move forward and not look to somebody else to try to give you something that the piece of paper, the Constitution can't give you any rights. So don't look to it to do so. That's just the reality. Welcome everybody. That's just the reality. So anyways, my Inks, I am that on all social media platforms. My name is the same across Instagram, X. And you can also find me every Friday on Trifecta Hour on YouTube and Rumble. I do a podcast every week with some 3 amazing gentlemen. And we talk all things, fun. So there is that. Thanks for having me. I don't know how you guys found me, and I don't know how I got here because I'm not a debater, but hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It was a good time. I think you brought a great perspective, so I'm glad that you joined. I had fun with you both this evening. Seems like the roomies had a good time as well. And as y'all know, I am your host, Legally Hype. You can find me on all social media platforms at I Am Legally Hype, where I break down legal and political, difficult stuff, make it easy, make it fun for us. With that being said, I know it's late at night. Y'all don't have to get off TikTok, but you got to get up off my page because the show is over. Until next time, bye.
Have a good one.
You as well.